Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a review of an Amouage fragrance, one of my favorite houses, probably the niche house most responsible to make me who I am today as far as the fragrance lover that I am, the taste that I am. Christopher Chong and his time at Amouage may be one of the most influential over my personal taste. And you all know I love Amouage. Well, I love old Amouage anyways. And so today, this is a long time coming. This review is a combination of a couple things. The first thing is that it's kind of a combination of the fact that I learned a long time ago that I don't move like other perfume reviewers move, meaning I don't do the same content at the same rate, and I don't talk about do the videos of the perfumes for the same reasons. Many of them do it for, of course, compensation, and when brands send them free bottles, they have to do it to keep the free bottle train going. Many of my bottles have been purchased with my own money. Not all, but many of them. I have had bottles sent to me by friends. I had bottles sent to me by brands, and I've said upright, this was sent to me by the brand, and believe what I say about it or not. But my whole thing is I want this to be kind of a intellectual perfume lover's safe haven to go and kind of hear my thoughts and discuss in the comments back and forth about perfume. And now that Amouage made the, I think, stupid decision. Well, they've made two stupid decisions recently. The first stupid decision, in my opinion, is getting into bed with L'Oreal. Allowing L'Oreal to buy a stake in Amouage is, I mean, Sultan Qaboos is probably flipping in his grave right now, in my opinion. They are desecrating and soiling the good name of Amouage by allowing L'Oreal to have their fingerprints anywhere near Amouage, in my opinion. That's just one Ram's opinion. I think it's a huge mistake. As if, you know, the damage that the Fish Man has done wasn't enough. Now you have L'Oreal potentially coming in. And the other thing is discontinuing fragrances like this. So today we're going to talk about Fate Woman. Now, Fate Woman is created by a perfumer whose name is Dorothée Piot. Sorry, the Fate Woman wasn't on the front. This is actually a snap cap is why it's like that. So this is one of the old original bottles before they went to the magnetic caps. And so this is an old made in Oman version. Sorry, I put lotion on my hands before this, so I'm a little worried about dropping the bottle, which I should not have put lotion on before this review. But it came out in 2013. Parfumo calls it an Oriental Spicy. Fragrantica calls it a Floral Chypre. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit about what Luca Turin said about it, because this is a fragrance he actually gave 5 stars to, and I don't always agree with Luca Turin. In fact, there's some things about this fragrance he said that I disagree with, but I agree with him on the 5-star part. If I rated fragrances, this would be an absolutely amazing stunner of a fragrance, marketed towards women. And, you know, that's one of the things about Amouage that I learned early on, is that their fragrances are sometimes fragrances that you need time to spend to understand them. Very rarely would you just spray on an Amouage and be like, oh, it's pleasant, it's nice. A lot of times they're complex, they're challenging, they have moving parts. They take time for you to understand and appreciate. But if you're a perfume lover and you love the vintage fragrances, you love the history of fragrances, you love bold, daring scents, Amouage under Christopher Chong should be a house that you absolutely love and adore. And more people are beginning to search out these old Amouages under Chong's, you know, under his creative directorship, if you will, during those years, right? And so for me, this is a long time coming. I've had this bottle for 2 or 3 years now. It's not a new acquisition. I've worn it. I've had about maybe 10 mils of 2 ml decants, the vintage old ones of Fate Woman. And so I have experience with this fragrance. Even though there's not a big dent in the bottle, I have experience with this fragrance from wearing it from the decants, if you will. And so there are other women's reviews on this channel, but a couple things kind of came together to make this review happen. One, kind of like I said earlier, I don't move like other perfume reviewers do, and I just need to kind of feel I'm in the right headspace to review a fragrance. Today was the day for Fate Woman. Sometimes that's how it goes. You wake up, you're ready. There is some pre-preparation I've made for the video, but also today just felt like the day. And I try to listen to my commenters, subscribers as much as I can. It's impossible to listen to every request or just shift gears and do what a comment requests. But someone left me a comment the other day saying, don't forget about us ladies, is basically the gist of the comment. And I have reviewed multiple women's fragrances on the channel. I recently reviewed Van Cleef & Arpels Gem, which is truly a gem from the late 80s. Discontinued as well. I love talking about discontinued fragrances on the channel. I'm an advocate of discontinued fragrances. I'm a collector, first of all. That's the first thing. Discontinued fragrances a lot of times go back to a time when I feel like fragrance companies put more time and effort into the art of perfume, not just trying to pump out a unit. That's what it feels like these companies are doing nowadays. They're just pumping out a unit. And it's just a sales number for them. It's a number on a graph. It's a number on a chart. It's a number on a quarterly earnings call. Not for me, not for us perfume lovers. It's more than that. It's more than just a sales figure. You know, these bottles mean something to us. And so I've reviewed a couple of these women Amouages. I have an Amouage sort of women's live stream where I talk about some of these which have not been given the limelight, which they're probably due. Like if you want to learn about Bracken Woman, or if you want to learn about CL Woman or DL Woman, or all these other ones which have not been reviewed on the channel, you can go check out my live stream on these on my channel. Basically has an Amouage live stream, 2 of them dedicated to sniffing women's Amouage fragrances. But Fate Woman deserves to be spotlighted on its own. Kind of up there. So far I've spotlighted individual reviews of Ubar, which is one of the many full bottle women's versions of Amouage that I really would like to add to my collection one day. I've reviewed Overture Woman, which is another one. I've reviewed Jubilation 25, which I ended up buying a bottle after reviewing it off the sample. I reviewed Ashore, which is one of the newer, it's in the women's bottle, but I think they call it unisex. I've reviewed Epic Woman, or done a comparison with Epic, whatever the extrait version is, 53 or whatever the heck it is. And I've done Imitation Woman. So there have been some, let's say, spotlight given to the women's line, but not enough. I have to admit that when I first started, I focused solely on the men's, and I did what the guy who sits next to me at work did. He asks me now every day, what's the fragrance of the day? So I showed him, and his very first reaction, that's a woman's fragrance. Don't do that. I'm telling you, as a fragrance lover, you're making a mistake if you do that, because the women's line in Amouage deserves to be highlighted and spotlighted and discovered. If you're a fragrance enthusiast, there is a lot to discover and a lot to like on the women's side of the Amouage line, okay? So this was created in 2013, and it was created by a woman named Dorothée Piot, whose name you will hear over and over again on the channel, because she created Memoir Woman, which is another one that's on my full wish list. Allie very kindly sent me a decan of Memoir Woman. That's how I know Memoir Woman is on the full bottle wish list of women's Amouages. She did Figment Woman, which I'm actually not as big a fan of. She did Les Jeux Sans Fates, which is a Javoy fragrance, maybe one of my favorite Javoy fragrances. And she helped make Mitzman by Amouage, which there is a full review on the channel. So now that the word officially came down, I know maybe even a year or 2 ago, there was rumblings in the fragrance community that this bad boy, along with the masculine counterpart, both of them, were going to be discontinued by Amouage. And Amouage, I think, is making a fatal error, discontinuing their most artistic fragrances is what they're doing. They're keeping the ones that are simpler and easier to wear, in my opinion. That's what it feels like to me. They're moving more towards, they're kind of abandoning what Christopher Chong tried to do. Luca Turin, in his book, writes that Christopher Chong feels like an art director running a perfume brand, and that's exactly what he did. He was very specific about what he wanted, and he brought this artistic flair, which as a fragrance lover is amazing. That's why I say many perfume lovers should love the time Christopher Chong was kind of in power, Amouage, if you will. But getting back to Fate Woman, so if you want kind of the Cliff's Note version, if you want the 30,000 foot overview, here's how I would describe it. It's a spicy oriental. It starts off as a spicy oriental Chypre blend, okay? And I've talked about these oriental / Chypre blend fragrances before. And when it hits you, you're going to notice a couple things right out of the gate. Number one, it's very complex. Number two, it's very deep. Number three, it has one of the best chili notes I've ever smelled in a perfume right out of the gate. And that chili note is, I've talked about a couple fragrances that have an amazing chili note. One of them is actually known in the fragrance community as Pure Chili by Thierry Mugler's Amen line. It's a flanker. All of these flankers are discontinued from my understanding. Again, a L'Oreal decision, as if I haven't berated Amouage enough for getting into bed with L'Oreal. I think I can't stress enough how terrible of a decision I think that is. Mark my words, put a timestamp on the video, whatever you need to do. You can go back to it in 5 or 10 years or whatever. I mean, I'm not the only one calling that now. L'Oreal, historically, in my opinion, has not been kind to fragrance brands that they have owned. A la YSL is a perfect example of that. YSL used to be king of the mountain. Now it feels like they crashed directly into that damn mountain. This is unfortunately discontinued. It's actually known as a taste of fragrance. That's the technical name of this fragrance. I got a tester long ago, but this is one of my favorite flankers of the Amen line, and it highlights that chili note beautifully. But to me, this may be the best spicy chili note I've ever smelled in a fragrance. It opens up absolutely beautifully, and instantly you're going to notice that all of the notes in here are very legible, high quality ingredients, very legible and coherent. The dry down stays true to what the fragrance is trying to be. You know, some people say, oh, it falls apart in the base or whatever it is. This does not fall apart in the base, I can tell you that. And it smells reminiscent of things like opium. You can't get away from it. As soon as I smelled this, this was the very first fragrance that came into my mind. That's why I would probably consider this more of an Oriental blend than I would a Chypre, okay? But you're gonna notice connections instantly to things like opium. And actually, if you really wanted to take a simplistic Cliff's Notes version of Fate Woman, you could say that it is an Amouage twist on opium with a Chypre sort of construction, like a Oriental / Chypre. And that's one of the things I think a lot of people, when they first get into fragrances, when they really first get into fragrances heavily, okay, and they really start looking at it more as an art form instead of just some smelly water that you spray on to get compliments by chicks, or if you're a guy, or smell good if you're a girl, and whatever, you know, when they try to take the next step. One of the things I think that people get caught up on is genres, trying to place something in a genre and getting it exactly right. And many times, some of the best fragrances cross genres. It's not just a Chypre. It's not just an Oriental. It's a Oriental Chypre kind of blend, if you will. And so this is exactly that. And it would not be too far from the truth to call Fate Woman a Amouage twist on the opium sort of DNA. Lots of resins, lots of warm Oriental resins with spices, okay? It doesn't have the clove, but it has the chili note. And so it kind of goes about it in a little different way, but you get that. The most important thing is you get that patented Amouage frankincense. So I just sprayed this maybe, I would say 15, 20 minutes ago, right before I started the video. I need to start waiting until I start the damn video to start spraying, because I know some people like to kind of see the spray. But I can tell you already I'm getting that gummy labdanum and frankincense weaving its way in and out of all of the intricate little details. Like I said, very legible and very coherent fragrance. And for me, smelling some of their newer work, you may have heard me say this on the channel. I would smell it and I would say, this is nice, but it's not an Amouage, right? I said that about Enclave or Meander, for example. Meander was a great example of one that was nice, but not an Amouage. It almost turned into like a signature thing for me to say on some of these newer Amouages, but to me, Fate Woman checks every box of what an Amouage should be. It has the world's most beautiful incense woven in there. It has the artistic side of Christopher Chong. It has the throwback to vintage perfumery, and it's strong and it's powerful. This is a powerful fragrance. In fact, I remember reading an interview where Christopher Chong was actually worried that Fate Woman and Fate Man were too powerful. They were too strong. They were too loud. And so for me, what's interesting is, if you just look at the artistic side And real quick, I want to read what Luca Turin says before I get into the artistic side, because he gave Fate Woman 5 stars. So he gave Fate Woman 5 stars right here. He called it a celestial oriental, which makes sense because of the star-like imagery on the packaging. This is the man's box, but I think the woman's box is identical. I just think it's smaller because of the woman's bottle is built a little bit differently. But I think the imagery is identical. And we'll talk a little bit about this beautiful, I consider this an absolutely stunning package. I don't think this is tacky at all. I think it's brilliant for me. And you can almost see, you know, it's almost like the face of a clock, but also the sun, the shooting stars. You have the key opening the door. We'll talk a little bit about some of the imagery on here. But he calls Fate Woman, he says, a fresh, radiant, powdery advance briefly fills the room. You're faced with one of the most intricate and beguiling fragrances in years. Nothing this big, complex, beautiful has been done since the first Boucheron. I don't know the first Boucheron. Though the top has a Guerlain-like appetizing feel, I disagree. I don't get Guerlain. When I smell this, Guerlain does not come to mind. I mean, maybe if I really twisted my mind a little bit, I guess I could see where he's going, but it's not what came to my mind when I smell this. And he says directly here, he says, quote, Fate borrows its core from opium. That I 100% agree with Luca Turin on. Opium is the very first thing that popped into my head, or this, if you wanted to go back even further, Youth Dew by Estee Lauder, JHL. If you want to go after opium, you could go with JHL. You could go with Cinnabar, that kind of style. He calls it a woody balsamic with an emphatic dose of, now here's also where I disagree. He says a cool minty note, which we're going to talk a little bit about that as we get into the review. I don't get a necessarily minty note from this. I have to admit, I don't get a minty note, but there is this cooling aspect at play, which we'll talk about. And it says that Fate is to opium what Mitsuko was to Koti's Shipra, a transfiguration. The central structure is deep in there, now cloaked in a cloud of radiant dust borrowed from under unstructured opulence of gold. He's talking about gold, the Amouage fragrance, obviously, which is another women's fragrance that needs to be reviewed on the channel, along with its masculine counterpart, the original from 1983. And he calls it a brilliant touch, okay? Like sitting and watching a great orchestra play. He says, just don't wear it to supper. That's Luca Turin's write-up on Fate Woman. So some things I absolutely agree with, some things I disagree with. But it is, you can see instantly that Amouage is in the heart of its artistic stage, okay? Christopher Chong has now been in the role. This is 2013 this came out, so he's been in the role for some time. I think he got the role in 2007 if I'm not mistaken. But if you look at kind of the illustration on here, so you have kind of the you have this illumination of time. You've got this man here pointing. You've got the different phases of the moon. The sun iconography is kind of all over. You have the unicorns, and very interestingly, you've got the key, right? You've got the moon. So this celestial sort of imagery is here. The justice, the scales of justice being fair. If you look very closely, though, one thing that I thought was funny is obviously you have the tarot card and all that, the hourglass of time ticking away. But here you've got a ram. So very interesting. Maybe a little fate in there, that the future decisions, or, you know, your future soulmate you're going to meet, or whatever it is. But that really, seeing that ram really made me smile. Was it fate that I was going to be doing this review one day? Anyways, but the star imagery, maybe it's the packaging and the advertising kind of getting to me. But really, I was thinking about the opening, and I had no way to describe what I was smelling in the opening, because the opening was reminiscent of the past, i.e. Cinnabar, Youth Dew, Opium, whatever you want to call it. But the star imagery is outside of the technical side of the fragrance. So I can tell you about the chili note. I can tell you about the oriental vibes right out of the bat. But what I can't tell you about is how all those ingredients kind of just hit you in a way that reminds me of like looking up at the stars and seeing each twinkle of light kind of reflected in the back of your eye, and how you can just kind of let your mind wander in those moments. And you're looking up, you're seeing how big the universe is and how small we are, and how every moment in time is so precious. And, you know, for me, like I mentioned, I would rank this more as an Oriental than I would as a Chypre, although Fragrantica has it listed as a floral Chypre. I also don't get that minty aspect that Luca Turin was mentioning. So I don't get mint per se. But that being said, I will concede there is a touch of freshness in here. So yesterday I did an early impression on Elvis by Elvis Fragrances Inc., which Parfumo says was released in 91. Base Note says was released in 89. Someone told me the other day both are wrong and it was released in the mid 80s. I don't know. I always go off of Parfumo because I actually prefer Parfumo to Base Notes. But I did an early impression of it, and I talked about how in Elvis, in the top, there's these very bitter citruses that really pop and kind of remind you of being in a place where maybe they have like a big thing of water, and inside of that water you see fruits or in citruses kind of floating. You see lemons, limes, bergamot, stuff like that. But it's not just the fruit peeled. It's the entire fruit, almost cut like a cross section, where you have the whole part along with the skin. And when you drink it, you get that bitter hit of what the fruit, what this fruit and citruses kind of just sitting and being soaked into that water. So it's almost become like a part of it, right? And you drink it and you get hit with this, especially on a warm day, which is getting warmer here in Texas every day that goes by in April. Warmer and warmer and warmer it feels like. And so just imagine something that that cooling sensation when you drink something like that. This cooling sensation, this relief, that's a good way to put it. There is a little bit of this relief because everything in this fragrance is heavy. So you have cinnamon, pepper, chili, frankincense, jasmine, narcissus, labdanum, and rose, and then frankincense, oak moss, castoreum, vanilla, benzoin, patchouli, and leather. So everything is heavy. Everything is kind of weighing you down. That little bit of bergamot in the top, which I'm guessing that's what's adding the freshness, the way that they use the bergamot. I'm guessing that is what added a little bit of that freshness to the big, bold, resinous creation that is Fate Woman, right? And that is what I think gives that a little bit of a cooling aspect that Luca Turin called minty. I just think minty doesn't truly describe what I'm smelling. Maybe just more of an overall counterpoint, an overall balancing, if you will. If you take the weights and you know the mintiness just helps balance it just a little bit. It's still heavily weighted to the heavier Oriental side. This wears like a big, bold fragrance. Okay, there's just no getting around it. Now, one thing I will mention is in the air, Fate Woman smells powdery. When you, especially when you first apply, you're gonna get a little bit of a hit of a powdery Oriental, which Luca Turin called gold, kind of a homage to gold, which I'd never thought of that before until I read that from him years ago. I still don't think that. I think that's stretching it just a little bit, but it's an interesting point that he makes. I think there's just this general sense of powderiness that you will notice more in the air than you will notice when you do this. So if you're smelling it up close, you're not going to get hit with as much of the powders as it smells more accents, okay? But in the air, the people will smell it as a slightly powdery tint on an Oriental, okay? It's not as noticeable up close, as I said. So the Oriental side of it is the heavy labdanums, the vanillas. The floral Chypre side of this creation is this heady, but very powerful, and I would say almost like this sweet and spicy combination. So you know how sometimes I've used sweet and sour? This is sweet and spicy. And so that sweet and spicy combination comes at you kind of from all directions, just like I mentioned, all of the different points of light when you're staring at the night sky and you don't have light pollution. You can see just all of the different stars and planets, and it just seems like an infinite number, because there really kind of is an infinite number. That image of millions of stars, that's kind of how the rose, narcissus, jasmine combination hits you. You get all of these little details. Green, you get musky, you get powdery. I mentioned the powdery aspects earlier. I'm guessing that's coming from the floral heart. That's really the only place that I can think, other than the vanilla and the benzoin in the base, which comes out, I think, much later into the dry down. Something as early as 30 minutes in, you're getting powders. It's probably from that floral heart, if I had to guess. But it just feels like there's always like a note reflecting or a note bouncing off of something else. You know, it's like sending a radio signal out to space and having it bounce back. There is just this kind of very high quality interplay between the notes, and it's really truly amazing for a fragrance lover. This type of perfumery done in 2013 should give everyone hope that that it can still be done. I wish more fragrances like this were made. I will tell you, I really like, even right now, 30 minutes in or so, you can already, and I may have even mentioned it 5 or 10 minutes in, you can already get that gum-like labdanum resin. And that's why I say I get more of the oriental side of it, although the floral chypre side is the second half of kind of what makes Fate Woman. But it's very present, very high quality ingredients. And if you're a fan of heavy labdanum scents, like for example, Sahara Noir is the first one that came to mind, because that also uses labdanum and incense. I can't remember when Sahara Noir came out. Sahara Noir, also 2013. I did not know that, I swear to God. But I've often found it interesting to see what time period perfumes are released, and when two share a little bit of a similarity and they're released in the same year. I'm always thinking, I wonder what trends those houses are watching that kind of made them do something like this. So Sahara Noir is a great comparison. Now, Sahara Noir goes in a little bit of a different direction, because the brand claims that it has oud and papyrus in there, which makes it have that papery, darker side of things. This doesn't have the papyrus. It doesn't have the calamus or the cypress or the beeswax or the oud or all that stuff. But it's an interesting comparison anyways, and it's even more interesting they were both released in the same year. But if you like those type of heavy labdanum fragrances, which labdanum can usually give off this gum-like resin, very, very sticky, almost like if you put your fingers together, you wouldn't be able to open them again, like they're super glued shut. Or if you watched my review on Everlasting by the Zoo, that's a huge labdanum bomb. If you like those type of heavy labdanum fragrances, this is definitely one to sniff out. Definitely one to sniff out. And don't forget, I didn't mention there's a frankincense note in both the heart and the base of this fragrance. So it's frankincense in the heart and frankincense in the base. And so even if you don't love florals, because some people describe this as a floral chypre, even if you don't love florals, this is still one I would recommend, because of how complex it is, how many moving parts are going on. Here's how the original write-up of the scent was done by Amouage, because it's not on the Amouage website anymore, sadly, but it says, the new fragrance for women, Amouage Fate for Women. This is what, I like that Fragrantica keeps the original write-up. It says, is a spicy floral. It belongs to the Oriental Chypre floral fragrance category. Its composition opens with bergamot, cooling the rich blend of spices, pepper, chili, and cinnamon in the top notes. The heart of the composition includes a floral bouquet of rose, jasmine, and daffodil or narcissus, surrounded by a mysterious veil of incense and labdanum. I like that mysterious word. The base incorporates an extremely oriental blend of vanilla, patchouli, incense, benzoin, castoreum leather, and oak moss. Extremely oriental. I agree with that. And so all of these different kind of moving parts are going on. It's a very complex blend, and probably the part that most people would see if you kind of know my taste is if you look at the fragrance breakdown, you're probably instantly going to notice the leather and the castoreum. And castoreum is many times used to make up that leather accord, because castoreum has its own ability to smell slightly leathery, sometimes slightly metallic, sometimes slightly warming. And I'll tell you what, there is an element in here which I almost hear nobody talk about, and that's the chocolatey element. The patchouli in here sometimes gives off chocolatey vibes. So if you can imagine everything that I've said so far, and then throw in this amazing smell of chocolatey patchouli, which is very high quality. Oh, and deep and rich and textured, and you know, it's almost like you can feel the fuzziness on every leaf you touch. It's amazing. And I think if you see that leathery castoreum like Drydown though, and you think, okay, this is going to be a leather bomb or a castoreum bomb, you would be wrong. I would tell you that if you're looking for an Amouage that puts the castoreum note front and center more, I would actually recommend checking out Imitation Man, which I did a review of from a hotel room in Houston a month or two ago. Imitation Man is one of my all-time favorites. If you think wearing the fragrance proves which one you love the most. This is one of the Amouages with the biggest dent in it. Remember, when you have 600 fragrances, even a 5 or a 10 mil dent is impressive. But when you have a dent like this, that's a serious dent that you've been with. This is my dent. I did not buy a partial. And so go check out my review of Imitation Man. I absolutely love it. But I think that highlights castoreum much more into the Drydown. Here, it's used more as accents. And imagine just one of those many points of light kind of coming at you. This million points of light kind of coming at you, right? And so the castoreum doesn't play a central role, but it plays an important role because it's expertly blended. And into the Drydown, you will basically get that leatheriness. This is a 6-hour Drydown. 5.5-hour Drydown right now. I reapplied on top of my original Drydown at 7:30 in the morning. It's now 12 hours later, so I already reapplied on top of that. So I can't give you the 12-hour Drydown, but I bet you if you sprayed this on and then came back 12 hours later, you could still smell it. It would probably be very blurred. It wouldn't have the very, legit detail that I talked about in the beginning. But I think you would still be able to smell it 12 hours later. It's a powerful fragrance. And but into the Drydown is where you're going to start to get some of that leathery castoreum. But it's interesting because it's blended so well that sometimes it's very hard for me to tell where the labdanum stops and the leathery castoreum type notes begin. It's not like a clean cut transition. Everything is just so well blended into that ball of oriental resins, spices, and then you have the proper Chypre characteristics on top, which basically there's 3 or 4 main notes of a Chypre: bergamot in the top, labdanum usually in the heart or the base, and then oak moss, which there is an oak moss note in here. Part of me wonders, because this was 2013, if the increased oak moss regulations have anything to do with this coming off. Some have said it's been reformulated from what I'm smelling, from the snap cap to the magnetic cap. I can't speak to that. I don't know if that's true or not. My guess is that this was probably discontinued due to Amouage trying to shift direction and go in a different direction, is my guess. But finally, Chypres can usually have a patchouli note thrown in there as well, which this has all of that. And if it's a floral Chypre, they usually have a floral heart, which this has as well. And the oak moss in here adds to that green texture. I mentioned that sometimes you get little hints of green touches into the floral. The florals come across as very musky to my nose. Musky, heady floral is kind of a good descriptor of it, I think. But the style with those oriental resins and vanillas and balsams, and when you mix it with the incense and with those beautiful florals and the spices and that cooling bergamot on top, which I guess, if you really, I'm rethinking my giving Luca Turin a hard time for saying that there is some Guerlain touches in the top. I could kind of see that. because of the bergamot, the way that the bergamot is used in this cooling aspect. It almost has like the metallic aspect of the way some of the earlier Guerlains used bergamot, but incense, spices, that chili note, one of the best chili notes I've smelled in all of perfumery. It's spicy but not overwhelming. It allows some of the other notes to come in and mix. You get that cinnamon, and so just imagine, you know, something like opium, but twisted into a modern amouage, or imagine a modern Oriental Chypre mashup like Rochas Femme. And it's interesting. It's a very interesting fragrance for someone that wants to approach wearing and understanding fragrance from a artistic level, from a collector, from a enthusiast level. Somebody who I think that this didn't get as much love as it should have when it was released in 2013, just because of the times. I think a lot of women may smell this and think it reminds them of what their mother or grandmother wore. But for me, there is nothing feminine about opium. I love wearing opium. Opium is probably one of my favorite Orientals to wear ever. I've got multiple versions of it. Opium is one of those scents that always puts a smile on my face. And if you wear these sort of heavy Orientals in the summer, in the heat, it brings out even more of it brings out different characteristics than what you get when you wear it in the cold weather. And so I love wearing it all times of year. I just think that wearing Fate puts you in like a dream-like state, or it's like a dream fragrance for a fragrance lover, but it's like it puts you in a trance. Like if you just look at the bottle, I mean, I think this is one of the most beautiful bottles ever created, for me anyways. Just this sort of oil holographic like bottle where you know, a different part of it is being highlighted no matter which way you twist it, with this almost like regal building like cap on the top, you know, like you're looking at a important historical building. Domes, of course, and this is probably based around an important historical mosque or something in Oman would be my guess. But it always gives me this feeling of domes. You think of the Romans with Palatine Hill. You think of the dome in the Vatican. You think of the dome in Washington, D.C. And it's just a regal looking bottle to me. And then you add the box, which I absolutely love, all the different imagery. And if you really get down to it, you know, you can see you've got the hand, but then you have all these little details in here, the tarot card, the hours, the time on like a pocket watch here, and you can really get into all of these little details, the moon, butterflies. There's just so much going on with this release, so many clues, so many different you know, the key and the keyhole, and so for me, this is like being in a trance. It's like being hypnotized. It is like being literally told your fate. And I love the name. I love where they were going with it. I'm sad it didn't do as well. I wore Fate Man a lot, even in the warm Texas heat. And this is one of the biggest cumin bombs you will ever see. I will review this on the channel very soon. And this is also an extremely strong fragrance. You don't need very much. So even though that doesn't look like a big dent, I assure you it is. Fate has been given a lot of wear by me. Probably more. I probably worn the men's version more because in the old days, that's what I focused on. I focused on the men's side and I ignored the women's side to my own peril. And now I'm correcting that. And so the fact that this is recently discontinued, you can still find bottles at a respectable price. You probably won't find it for the price I got this at. I got very, very lucky with this one. But look around, shop around. The fact that it's recently discontinued bodes well in your favor. Sometimes you'll find them at discounters or stuff like that. But if this is on your list, then it's definitely something to look into now that the discontinuation has very recently gone through. So it's a sad video on one side, but on the other side, this is a celebration of what I would consider a beautiful form of perfumery that a man or a woman can easily enjoy wearing. So I hope this gave you a little bit of insight on Fate Woman. If you have experience with Fate Woman, I would love to hear your thoughts. Do let me know in the comments. I love the back and forth. Thanks for watching as always. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.